My name is Dr. Erin Lane. I come to you, if you saw my little snapshot right at the, that was a teaser to get you in the door for BBALI. I come to you with lots of experience in education. I have 20 plus years working with students, primarily with gifted students. I was a teacher, and then I needed to control more, so I became an administrator. And then I hated that because they don't really do things with students. So what did I do? I became a school counselor. And then after that, I was like, well, I still want to create more things, and I can't do as much as a school counselor. So I went back and got my PhD, because that's what you do. So I always found gifted kids in every part of my experience in education. Maybe gifted kids found me. I'm not quite sure. But they were attracted to me, and I was attracted to them. I really focused in a lot on kids who maybe weren't seen or weren't being seen by those around them. And that really led me to wanting to understand gifted kids holistically, not just their academic talents, not just where are they going to college, but who are they? And why, how can we best support them? Why are they a part of this program and want to continue to be a part of this program? And so my focus when I came to get my school counseling license was really on how do I support the gifted kids that I'm working with all the time, especially those gifted at-risk students. And I was fortunate that I came to this place. I am not from Iowa, but I came here because they have an emphasis on gifted because of the Belin-Blank Center. And I earned both my school counseling endorsement as well as my gifted ed endorsement, and was fairly fortunate to get a position within the state focusing only on gifted kids. And I worked with K-12 gifted within a large school district in the state and learned so much about myself as a helper, but more importantly about them. And that was really the focus. So I now as a professor get to conduct talks like this around the country. I just got back from Long Beach. I am sort of tan. My shoulders are completely sunburnt, so that's why I've got a jacket on. But during that time, I was talking to school counselors from around the country. How many of you work with your school counselors? I'm going to go a quarter of the room. Okay, my job within that was to present to them about gifted, to help them understand how gifted students may be different than the other kids who were coming into their office, academically, post-secondary planning, and social and emotional. And what I got was about 25 people coming up to me afterwards. It was virtual, so they put it out across the country. And I've gotten lots of emails since, but 25 people coming up to me going, can you come talk to me? Can you give me more resources? Can you do this? School counselors want to know how to help their students, especially post-COVID, especially as mental health becomes more of an issue. And so I know that I have a lot of experience with gifted and with social emotional learning in particular. But one thing that I always do for every, when do I click on? There we go. Every time I talk with gifted students or gifted educators and with school counselors now, is I ask them this question, or I pose this statement to them. What you believe to be true about giftedness and talent development determines which students you serve and how you serve them. Take a moment and reflect on that. Who is in your gifted program? Are they all high achievers? Do they all feel like they have it put together? Do you think they have it all put together? Do they reflect the demographics of your population totally? So as we go through this presentation, I'm not going to focus in a lot on which kids are high achievers, which kids are underachievers, which kids come from a different religious background or have a different racial identity or socioeconomic status. I'm not going to focus on those things, but I really want you to focus in for yourself, thinking about what you believe to be true of what a gifted kid looks like. And think about who you could find more of, or who you could find different than who you already serve. Or maybe you do an awesome job. Anybody who's like, yes, we do an awesome job of identification. Whew, that's telling. So thinking differently, I think, might help. Okay, the other thing I will say is I will ask you a lot of questions. Sometimes it's just a hand raise, but for those of you in the room who are a little bit more outgoing or like to speak in class, feel free to say answers, okay? I'm not necessarily a raise your hand kind of person. You should see my doc students and my master students. They're just spitballing things at me. So feel free to respond verbally if you can, or go ahead and write things down if you want to. All right. So always the educator, I have to have objectives, right? So throughout this presentation, you will hear three things: becoming an expert, becoming the space, and becoming a partner. And those are the three things that I want you to take away from this. How can you do those things? And don't worry, I'll give you some answers and some ideas. I'm not going to leave you hanging, but expert, space, and partner. Those are the things I want you to focus on. And throughout this presentation, we will be learning about Megan. Megan will be my case study for the day. And we will take her through parts of her life and how she experienced her giftedness in order to kind of show you what this could look like in kids that might look like your students. So Megan she's the middle child of a very large family. She comes from a low SES background, but she has a two-parent household, and things are pretty chaotic where she lives. There's a lot of kids, there's not a lot of time, and not a lot of money. And so she oftentimes finds herself on the out. She is surrounded by people who love her, but aren't very loving. Between that and the chaos of her life, things are a little intense. She oftentimes finds that her parents have very high expectations of her, but as she moves through the world and meets or exceeds those expectations, parents get a little resentful. They don't always love that she's able to do things so quickly and so easily. She also takes on a really big caregiver role within her family. So when her student who is her sister who is nonverbal needs support, she's oftentimes the one that will support that child. As Megan started elementary school, the only word I can think of is intense. She did everything intensely. She was a voracious reader. She dug into things. When the teacher said, go look and do some research on this, she was in it. She loved it. She would dig in and do more than what was expected of her. She was also a very focused and serious ballet dancer and soccer player, and loved to see how her body moved through space and how her awareness changed as she changed. She was also extremely protective of other people. She wanted everyone to be safe and to have everyone experience a sense of fairness and justice. But she was also a know-it-all. And she was not afraid of telling people they were wrong, even if they were adults, because this is the right answer. And she was positive of it. So you can imagine what her teachers and her parents and her siblings and her peers thought of her. Anybody want to take a guess? Defiant, precocious. They didn't really like her because she's always right. So they struggled with her and getting her to interact with kids. She was also very sensitive. Things around her were loud and made her head hurt. She wouldn't eat certain foods or wear certain clothing because that didn't feel right for her. And she was highly empathetic. and she often experienced intense pain when she saw others in pain. Her parents and her teachers were really surprised by her behavior. And on her first grade report card, it was noted that she was reading at a fourth grade level. However, her teacher and her mother decided that because she had so few friends, they weren't going to tell her because they didn't want her to feel different. Guess what? Megan felt different. So she had a couple of close friends, but mainly she played alone and she got lost in books. Okay, do we have a good sense of Megan in elementary school? All right. What stood out for you in Megan's story? What type of gifted characteristics did you hear in that story? Sense of justice, yes. High sense of justice. Intensity. Intensity in what ways? In what areas? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, loves to read. What else? Anything else stand out for you? Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. She needed people who understood her and where her brain was going. Ah,
Our typical child, like sports,
yeah. Right. So she tried to fit in. She tried to not be different. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. So being able to empathize at a very early age. Yeah. Right. Yeah. She was very serious about, even though she was making, connections with people her age that way, she was very serious about it. Yes. Her behavior was talking more than her mouth was talking, more than her brain was able to convey. What assets do you think she has based on what you know now? What does she have that she can lean on if things, empathy, adaptability, protective of others? Yeah. Yeah. So being nurturing. Yes. Man, you guys are right on it. Right. So she has an out. She has an outlet. Yeah.
self-aware a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. She's finding ways to exist in a space that doesn't always feel like it fits her and what her needs are. I think that's going to lead me really well into what burdens she has. What does she have to carry with her? She doesn't feel like she fits in. She feels like she's different. Right. So she's caring for her family. She's responsible for them in many ways. Right. So there's what parents say of, I want you to be successful, but don't be too successful. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I heard one more thing from this part. Anybody? Yeah. Right. Yeah. She hasn't made that, even that play connection. Okay. So, yay, y'all know a lot of the common characteristics of gifted kids. This wasn't really a test, but it was a way to see, okay, how much do I actually have to explain? So there are 5 areas of intensity or overexcitabilities: the psychomotor, sensual, intellectual. I have to read now. Imaginational and emotional, right? So those are the overexcitabilities or the intensities that gifted children often feel. That is how they exist in the world. They have that, they experience one or more of those things extremely intensely. So when they are out and about in the world, it's like things are in technicolor. If you want to use a metaphor, a visual metaphor, right? Things are a lot brighter and bolder and more intense when they experience them. It also means that they're very passionate about those things that they see because they see them with such intensity. The flip side and complementary piece of that is that they have heightened sensitivities. So in those areas, we see a lot of sensitivity to the world around them, the experiences that they have, the cognitive experience as well as the emotional experiences are all heightened. The environmental experiences are much bolder and brighter. And all of that comes at them, and it feels overwhelming sometimes. Additionally, that heightened sensitivity gives them a lot of empathy. At times, if they have that type of heightened sensitivity. And it makes them yearn for justice and fairness. And so you'll see gifted kids go, well, this is right and this is wrong, and that's the way it is. Or I don't think that kid should take that toy. This kid didn't have it as long as that kid. That you see in preschool. That sense of fairness and justice. The last part of this is asynchronous development. And oftentimes, this is what people think of when they think of gifted kids. They think of that heightened cognitive, they get things really fast cognitively, but maybe emotionally they're not very well prepared. So I give the example of a kid that I worked with who could literally sit down and talk to me like a 40-year-old man. And he was 5. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're having conversation about the news. We're having conversation about, the world, that's, what's happening. And then he would leave and go to his class, and he would have a literal temper tantrum because a kid borrowed his pencil without asking. On the floor, screaming, crying, disrupting class, not know how to deal with his emotions. And the teacher was baffled. How do I deal with this in the classroom? How do I deal with a kid who knows all of these things and acts like a 2-year-old when encountering any sort of complex social issue? And so that's the stereotypical example of asynchronous development. Is one area of their life is so far advanced, and the other is not as much so, or actually behind, usually. Okay, we good there? Thumbs up? Okay. All right, so guess what? Now, you don't have to become the expert, you are the expert. And so, you actually, just by doing that, know more than most of the teachers, most of the administrators, and most of the school counselors in your building. Be the expert. When you go to a meeting, be the expert. When you talk about kids, how kids are doing in class, be the expert. Look for these things. talk about them, advocate for these children. Because if you don't, the person who knows the most doesn't speak out and say, hey, I'm wondering if maybe we think about some other reasons for this child to be like all around the room all the time. Maybe it's not that they definitely have ADHD. Maybe they're just needing to get out some anxious energy. Okay? What are some different things that we could think about for this child? You can be the expert. You should be the expert. When it comes to PD opportunities, I want you raising your hand. I want you saying, I'm going to do a PD on gifted ed. In PLC meetings, talk about the kids. And don't hesitate to share because you might be getting in people's way. I know Iowa nice. I'm not from Iowa, but I have learned Iowa nice. And nobody wants to be this thorn in somebody's side. And with this, I need you to be the thorn. I need you to be, I would go to meetings and they would know that, oh, Erin's going to talk about gifted kids, so we better just figure out how we're going to deal with them right now. That was me. So yeah, I would rather, right? I'd rather they be annoyed by me and do things for the kids because that's my job in that space. Be the expert. All right, we're going to get back to Megan. All right, Megan's grown up a little bit, right? She looks a little, more interested in the world, more wary of the world. In late elementary, life in Megan's house is extremely chaotic. Her parents are constantly fighting, and all she wants is peace and quiet. She just wants them to stop. Her older brother and sister are never home, and so she becomes the oldest sibling and has to take care of the other younger siblings. By 4th grade, Megan is having panic attacks. And she doesn't know that they're panic attacks because what 4th grader knows that they're having panic attacks? She doesn't know what to call them. She doesn't know what it is other than she can't think and can't breathe and needs to figure out a way to get quiet. And she's really worried that people will think she's crazy. Sometimes she feels kind of crazy. She's worried all the time. She tries really hard to find some sort of control and peace and comfort in her life. So she doesn't eat very much. She doesn't sleep very much. And as much as she can, she escapes into books. It has become her thing. She spends all of her time trying to make everyone in her life happy. And so she tries to be as perfect as possible. She's going to be the best sister, to make sure that her parents don't argue about them. She's not going to take up too much space or think about, the different things that she might need, like a new pair of soccer shoes, because she's kind of growing out of those, because that might make her parents fight about money. She wants to be the perfect ballet dancer for her mom and the perfect soccer player for her dad. And she thinks that if she does that, maybe if I'm just perfect, everything will be okay. At school, life is easy. In fact, it's too easy. She's asked to do book reports over books that she's read 3 years ago that her classmates are just now getting into. She gets handed a math worksheet, and she knows how to do the math problem with one problem. She doesn't care about school because school doesn't care about her. They don't see her as a person, and so she stops caring. She doesn't do her homework. She very rarely does what she's supposed to do in class. When she's handed a test, she knows how to do it, so it doesn't matter. And it's elementary school, so really, do grades matter, she would say. And she's found that because she's not talking, because she's not telling people the answers, her friends kind of like her. her peers talk to her now because she's not demanding or controlling or sharing everything with them, right? So she finally has friends. She has friends in dance and soccer who don't know that she's smart. And in her classroom, maybe there's one or two kids who can forgive her for being the way she was before. But for the most part, Megan just kind of exists in the world, trying to be as perfect and quiet as possible to make sure that everybody around her is happy and respects her and likes her. So, what social emotional concerns does Megan experience? What do you hear from that story? Yes. She's always hiding something, always hiding part of herself. Yep. Right. She lives in a fantasy world, and sometimes that fantasy world changes into a detrimental fantasy world. I purposefully didn't go there, but thank you for doing that. I was like, that might be a little too intense for them. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Keep the peace, right?
She put on herself.
Yeah.
I'm perfect.
We'll be okay. Yeah. That's what I can control. Yeah. Making herself as small as possible in that environment. Yeah. So that asset that we had before, her ability to be empathetic and see other people for where they were, that's gone. We're hiding that part. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Can definitely create some situations for kids. Yeah. Yes. Yes. We're at a crossroads, right? We're at a place where if she has some additional assets placed in her path or given to her, she could be she could be a great leader and a great scholar, but she also has a lot of burdens. And if more burdens are placed there could be a lot of concerns. It can spiral pretty quickly. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the social emotional concerns that you talked about with Megan. First, masking. And that is the main one, right? In the case of Megan, she is masking a lot. She is showing us ways in which a lot of gifted kids exist in the world when they aren't accepted as they are. They feel the need to hide those talents because at home they're not accepted, because at school their peers aren't appreciative, or their teachers don't respect that, or don't see it as an asset. And so we oftentimes see gifted kids mask who they are as well as their emotions. And I think a lot of times we think of the dysregulated gifted kid who is out of control, that asynchronous development piece, like I was saying, that was very stereotypical. The kid who is just constantly cannot figure out which emotion they're going to feel in that moment and express clearly. But really, a lot of research goes around the fact that gifted kids have a lot of emotions, but don't feel comfortable expressing them to most people, either because emotions are not culturally acceptable or situationally acceptable, or people think that those gifted kids have it all together. And if I show myself as not having it all together, will they think less of me? Will I not be as great in their eyes? And so they mask that emotion. And I can say, both from the research that I've read and from my anecdotal experience, that gifted kids mask far more often than that dysregulation shows. The dysregulation gets a lot of the attention, but the masking is what most gifted kids are experiencing and why they need our support. Little side note, last year, I guess the thing that started all of this, when I was at working with the Belin Fellows, I was asked a question that, of course, because I'm a professor and a researcher and I'm intense, I, of course, ruminated on for like a year. I was asked a question about, someone was told that with gifted kids, that they experience mental health concerns less than their non-gifted peers. And I was like, okay. And so the question was, do they experience them less, more, or the same? And I have always kind of gone with the same. And basically, we don't have enough information. So for the past year, even before Randy asked me to do this, I was like, all right, let's figure out the answer to this. Okay, reality is there's no answer. We don't know because of what I just talked about. Because when we study, and I'm guilty of it too, when researchers study gifted students, we oftentimes study specific populations of gifted students, right? High ability students that we can get from different organizations. Students who are at the centers, right? At Belin, at Northwestern, at all the centers across the country. We have access to those students. We can study them. But the kids that are in your classes, the kids that are in your districts, we don't have access to them. We can't get access to them usually. It's very hard. I've tried. It's not going to happen. And so really what we know is that we don't know. We know that we are not aware of the amount of students that experience mental health concerns versus, their non-gifted peers. But what we do know is that because of those characteristics that I just talked about, we know that gifted students experience mental health concerns differently. And so there's a reason that I was pulled into a district to just work with gifted kids, because the counselors that were working with them in the community and in the school were not touching what was happening with those kids. They needed somebody who knew how to work and talk to and advocate for the gifted students in that population. So whether or not we know the numbers, we do know that they need specific things. And one of the reasons that we know that they need specific things is we're seeing things like existential angst and depression. How many junior high, elementary kids do you know who are coming up to you going, oh my gosh, the world is going to end. I just saw it on a PBS special and the world is going to blow up and I'm really worried. And oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And that is a minor version of what we see. But having a conversation with a third or a fourth grader about how, yes, it is true that the sun will explode and the earth will end, and but a lot of things are going to happen before that, right? So, but talking with them about that and not just dismissing it and going, no, that's whatever. Where did you hear that? Digging into things with them. That's how we work with some of that existential angst. The meaninglessness of life, the meaninglessness of what they do and whether or not they do their homework. And that happens at the junior high level, the high school level. Yeah, kids are like existential. Never in a million years did I think when I was going through my master's program that I'd be using Gestalt existential therapy with gifted or with kids, but I did in my first month of my first year as a school counselor because of this. Because of that existential angst. What's the next one on there? Everybody knew it was going to be on there, right? Anxiety. How many of you have a gifted kid with anxiety? How many of you have a non-gifted kid with anxiety? Yeah, it's a common thing right now. Or kids are bombarded with lots of social media, with tons of information at their fingertips, right? This lovely thing is a blessing and a curse. Social media is a blessing and a curse. Google is a blessing and a curse. And our gifted kids, they experience the same anxiety that their peers experience. But I like to talk about it. You ever use a top? Like I know, old school, right? Some of you are going, what the heck is a top? The thing that spins and spins and spins, you like pump it and it spins, yeah? I like to think about a gifted kid with anxiety like a top. And if you give it enough, it stays and it's balanced and it's good. You give it enough information, you give it enough exposure to other people and experiences, it's balanced, it's good. But if you continue to pump that thing, they get overwhelmed. If you pump information into them and they're not ready for it, or it's too much information, or it's too much empathy that they have to feel about the social media post that comes about their friend in third period at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they stress about it all night long, right? That's too much, and the top goes off, and they can't regulate it back. Also, if you give it too little, if you say social media, no phones, no nothing, no information, the gifted kid kind of goes, well, what do I do? I don't have anything to do. I don't have any information. And they go wonky that way. So helping them find that balance of where is the good balance of information without overloading, without underloading. Giving them opportunities to reflect on what they're seeing and hearing and reading so that the anxiety that they feel, the worry that they feel inevitably, they'll be able to work with. They'll be able to adapt to. Oops. The next one is perfectionism. And I purposefully took those out because a lot of people say, oh, anxiety or perfectionism is just anxiety. And in some ways, yes, it is. It's that fear, it's that worry that's overwhelming. But there's a little bit of a kick to it because it's not just about anxiety and fear and worry. It's about anxiety and fear around something that is never possible. Perfection is not possible. Our kids have this thing in their brains of like, this is the perfect essay. This is the perfect piece of artwork. This is the perfect game. the perfect piece that I played on the piano. It's not reality. There's always something off. And so they will always have that worry. They will always have that anxiety. Some kids can find ways to have that anxiety and make it work for them. I get stage fright every time I step on in front of people. Hate it, absolutely hate it. You'd never know, I'm really good at hiding it. But the same thing is true. They can find ways to adapt that fear, adapt that worry to make it work for them, but they'll never be perfect. They'll never have perfection. And so you can say there's a debate within the gifted world that there is such thing as healthy perfectionism, right? When they've adapted and they've created that less worrisome environment where they use their worry and they use their fear to make things better and bolder and be more, creative. And then there's the unhealthy perfectionism where it's detrimental to them, right? Where it makes them stop working or stop doing things. How many of you have the kid who just doesn't hand in homework because it's not perfect? Yeah. So that's a kid that has that unhealthy perfectionism. They have a trait that makes them not do things. But then there's the other camp that says, is it ever really healthy to worry all the time, to constantly be worried, to constantly have that fear of not being perfect? And I have a mentor who's now my friend and colleague in this department. And she talked to me when I was in my master's program that she told me she was a recovering perfectionist. And I was like, that is the best thing I've ever heard. Because what does that sound like to you? Somebody over here said it earlier. Addiction, right? And so I started to think about perfectionism being like an addiction, and that I could make it healthy sometimes. I was never going to get rid of it. I was never going to make it go away. It was always going to be there. And I think that's a great way to talk to our students about perfectionism being something that, yes, can make you a better student. It can make you think more deeply about a project. Wanting something to be the best it can be is not a bad thing. But when it gets to the point where it is detrimental to you, where it is detrimental to the way that you are and who you are as a being, that is when that addiction takes over. And you can be a recovering perfectionist. And then every time you transition into a new role, or every time you get a new big project, you're going to feel those urges come back a little bit. But that's not perfect. That's not perfect. So figuring out ways to tamp those down is really important. All right. Checking time, sorry. Sort of in the middle of that emotional piece that we've just covered is, and then the social piece, is this identity development piece, okay? Do gifted kids know that they're gifted? Sometimes. Who tells them that they're gifted? Okay. How do they know?
Grandma.
Their grandma. Yes, because every grandma thinks their kid is gifted. Identity development is important, and it happens throughout our life, whether we know it or not. With gifted kids, a lot of times they don't think about giftedness as an identity, but we do know that the more they can think about themselves as a gifted individual, the more assets they're going to have, the more protections they're going to have, because they're going to understand, oh, that's why I do that sometimes. That's why I relate to this person really well, but not maybe that person as well. Or, I really can't stand it when they're telling a story because they don't tell stories like I tell stories. So understanding that identity development both can help them mentally, emotionally feel secure about themselves, as well as socially, because now I can relate to someone. Now I have some way to understand those kids. And that leads us to peer relationships, right? We talked earlier about Megan and how Megan kind of masked her identity in order to be friends with people. She didn't want people to know she was gifted. Peer relationships are really challenging in certain developmental times of a kid's life. And so having kids be able to be open about that identity is a really important component. But it's also important to know that you can relate to kids who aren't gifted too, right? Who did Megan relate to? Her friends on the soccer field and her dancer friends. Some of those might have been gifted dancers or gifted soccer players, but she could relate to kids who maybe weren't the same type of gifted as she was as well. And so it's a way to understand that there are more parts of you that can help you engage in peer relationships. And lastly, family environment. Somebody said earlier, a lot, like something about social construct. How we understand giftedness depends on the culture that we grew up in, right? The keynote speaker at the gifted education conference the school counseling conference I was just at, was a NFL football player. And he talked about the fact that he didn't call it gifted, I did, but he was so talented on the football field. And he grew up in a district that was the best district for sports in the country, according to ESPN. And so he didn't learn to read. He only learned to read to like a 6th grade level because it wasn't important in his community. Instead, he learned to be an athlete because that was important in his community, in his family. That was important to the people that he loved and respected. Now, here's reality. He then grew up to be in book clubs and write his own books and started being a motivational speaker. And he learned to read really deep things really fast. What I was hearing as he was talking about that is like, dude, you're gifted in those ways too. But those weren't respected by his communities. Those weren't pushed by his communities as the things that needed to be important in his life. And so the family environment can really, and the school community can really shape how our gifted kids end up and their talent development can end up. And so it is our job to make sure that the gifted kids that we work with, yes, are developed in their areas of ability, and that they have all of these other areas that they're also exploring. Okay. So just because of time, I'm going to not ask this question, but give you some of the pieces that you need to think about. So how do you do this, right? I just gave you a bunch of things, a bunch of problems that kids could have. The first thing is form a relationship. From the start, find your gifted kids and make sure that they have an adult that they can form a relationship with. Research shows that one stable, solid adult in a kid's life can be a major protective factor. And so you can be that protective factor for a gifted kid. It's about the little conversations. It's starting listening to a kid talk about the video game they were playing. Do you know anything about video games? No, but I'm going to go learn. I'm going to figure out what this particular game does, and I'm going to ask them about it. I'm going to ask them, talk to me about what that looks like. And that one comment that you overhear in a hallway conversation or as the kids are in your classroom doing other things, that one comment back to that kid can make a huge difference because it's starting that relationship. It's not about the weather. It's not about the schoolwork. It's not about how was recess or what did you do over summer break. It's a true connection with that kid. You heard something that was interesting to them and you were curious about it. You wanted to make that connection. One thing. The flip side of this is that oftentimes we hear something about a kid, and especially with gifted kids, we're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And we want to tell them how amazing we think they are. And so we go up to them and we're like, oh my gosh, I heard that you scored 4 goals in the soccer game last night. That is amazing. You are so talented. You are just the best soccer player I know. That sounds great, right? It sounds wonderful to hear praise. Except for a gifted kid, that's all they're known for sometimes, is the thing that they do the best. And you have to be the person who sees beyond the thing that they do the best. Because then they can't show you who they truly are, because you are already in awe of them. You already think, oh, they can't have anything going wrong because they're the best. And I don't want to disappoint them. That makes sense? All right, actively listen. How many of you have ever taken a class on active listening? Okay. That was a shot. Okay, active listening is different than just listening. So I can sit here, if I were in your shoes, I'd be going, okay, I hear what she's saying. I've been at this all day. I don't know if I really hear what she's saying. Let me just doodle some notes or make a drawing. Are you listening to me? Sure. You're hearing what I'm saying, but you're not actively listening to me. You're not processing things and thinking about what I'm saying to you. Active listening is being present in the moment with that kid, right? Okay, I went home for lunch. I was like, oh, I'll just catch up on a couple of emails. I'm sitting here and my 6-year-old daughter comes up to me and she's like, Mom, listen to everything I did this morning. I'm like, yeah, tell me, great. Am I actively listening to her? No, I'm looking at my email. And I could sense it from my daughter. She's like, oh, you're not really listening to me. And so put the email away, listen to the kid, right? Actively listen to them. Don't try and take control of the conversation. It is not your control. I know it's hard. It's hard for adults to not take control of the situation, not lead it in the direction that you want it to go, but just listen. Don't try to judge them, and don't try to fix it. The kid shares something with you, and they're like, gosh, oh, so-and-so on the playground, it was so annoying, blah, 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 blah. Assuming that there's absolutely nothing like really wrong, it's okay that they had annoying interaction on the playground. Your job is not to fix everything. Your job is not to make it perfect. Don't fix it. Similarly, don't make it about you. A lot of times when working with gifted kids, we're like, oh, they feel so alone. I want them to make them feel better and make them feel more normal. And so I'm going to tell them about a story of me growing up and how that was the same as what they're going through. Trust me, it's hard as a counselor listening to kids experience everything that I went through and going, yeah, I can't really tell them that it gets better and you're okay and everything's going to be fine. And here, let me tell you this story, right? Because that doesn't help them, because they need to be heard, not hear about my life and my problems, right? So don't try and fix it, and don't try to make it about you. Actively listen to where they are. Be curious. Ask open-ended questions, right? We all know open-ended questions. We've taken our teacher training. We know open, closed questions, open questions. We're good. Okay, good. The other thing that you can do is try and reflect an emotion that you feel or that you think that they're feeling. So we don't talk about emotions in our culture. It's just not normal. And so kids oftentimes don't know the names of the emotions that they're feeling, but if they're sitting there and their teeth are gritted and their hands are clenched and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so, what are they feeling? Anger, frustration, name it. Wow, you look really frustrated right now. And even if you're wrong, guess what? A kid's going to correct you. So name the emotion. It's okay. Be curious. I was telling somebody earlier, I'm going to tell this story. I don't know what it's like to grow up with a cell phone next to my bed. I don't know what it's like to get text messages at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm 12 years old. I literally grew up with a phone in my kitchen with a really long cord that maybe we could stretch to the bathroom if we really needed privacy. I was oftentimes like, tell me what that feels like to get a text message from your best friend who's, crying at 3 o'clock in the morning. How does that empathy sit with you? How do you go to sleep at night after having that happen to you? Be curious. Be humble that you don't know what you don't know. Okay. Lastly, the majority of communication is nonverbal. How did you know that I was frustrated and angry when I was going like this? Did I say? No. My face, my body, right? That goes the other way. So if you're actively listening and you're trying not to be judgmental, where I grew up, we had a phrase called hold your face. Hold your face, right? So I'm not going to show you what I'm thinking. I'm not going to show you, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why did you do that? And roll my eyes and kind of look all over the place, right? As an adult, in order to be non-judgmental, you have to remember that you're communicating a lot of stuff to kids. If you're like this every time you talk to them, my stance looks very off-putting, right? My students used to joke with me all the time because I was always in a hurry. I was always rushed, but they would always know that I was listening to them because I would go like this. And I would breathe. I would take the moment, breathe myself, okay. And they would go, oh yeah, she actually heard me. And then they'd see me write it on my hand because I never had Post-it notes. But I gave them cues, right? I gave them cues about how important they were to me. Okay. So now you are not just the expert. You are the space for that kid, right? One stable adult, that's all they need. One person that can hold space for them to explore who they are and who they might want to become. Hold the space for them. Be their space. But holding the space can also be very exhausting. So let's take our last turn with Megan. In middle school, near the end of 5th grade, somebody noticed the discrepancies between Megan's test scores and her and her work at school. They were like, maybe you need to look at a magnet program that we have here in the district. And she was recommended for this magnet program, and she sat and she did a COGAT and with a bunch of other kids. And then they interviewed her, all of these adults in a room with her, interviewing her. And it was the first time in her life that she would vent about how much she hated school and about how homework sucked and she didn't want to do it. And adults really listened and they were like, yeah, I could see why you would say that. And she would rant about issues that were happening in the world that were like countries and continents away from her. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that, right? They were engaging with her. So Megan got in to the gifted program or to this magnet program. And she finally could have real conversations because everybody in that program were the same as her. They wanted to engage in conversations about politics and the state of the world and not just TikTok videos and what sports team won the day before. And so they talked about books and had more in-depth conversations. Her school held space for students to challenge each other and challenge themselves. And when Megan challenged a little bit too much and the teacher pushed back, she had teachers who were on her side and helped her navigate how to engage in some of those conversations with teachers and not just be inarticulate and scream at them or tell them they were stupid. When she was anxious and her energies needed to get out because of a math assignment or because of an assignment or a test, she had teachers who would let her get up and sharpen pencils or run passes to the office. They gave her outlets so that she wasn't always like this. One teacher connected her with a community organization who helped her to plan things for kids so that they could do rallies And she joined up with some political candidates and did canvassing so that she could tell adults what kids thought or what kids were thinking about when it came to voting. Like, who does these things? But her home life was still a challenge. And in 7th grade, she took the SAT and scored higher than 95% of the students who took the test that year. She got a great letter to this amazing summer program that would allow her to go to camp and be all the time, get away from her house, be with kids who were just like her all the time. But her dad said no. He told her she was being uppity, and he threw away the letter. So she had this split of the school, that life that she wanted, and the family that didn't quite accept her. Her anxiety and her perfectionism hadn't gone away, but she could rely on the fact that she had that space at the very least. And so the school did do things to nurture Megan's abilities, her cognitive abilities, and then also tried to help her address her social emotional challenges, right? They let her get some anxious energy out. They found ways to get her moving. They supported her ability to want to engage in the world with social and political and social justice issues. But one person can't do it alone. One school can't do it alone. You have to find all the people. Her home life was a mess, but her school was okay. She had to find a way to get both to be okay in order to fully develop. And so it's great that we've got one teacher. It's great that you all are here, but you have to find other people. You cannot take on this burden alone. You cannot. The social emotional lives of gifted kids is oftentimes so chaotic, and if you really embrace it and try to take that on as your thing, it can get overwhelming. And so find your people. Find people here today that you can connect with, that you can associate with and say, hey, I've got a kid who, what do you think? Find your consultants, right? I'm sure Belin people are like, yes, let's do it. You can consult with them. Use a team approach in your school, right? Find ways to find the people within your school who are like-minded, who want to support gifted students. And then find identification practices and programming practices that fit for your district. And the more voices at the table, the better, because you have more perspectives. So even though you can't connect with a kid, that doesn't mean that the person next to you can't. Maybe they have that relationship. Recognize the strengths in other people and partner with them. As a school counselor, I know how to counsel kids. I suck at teaching math. I'll be honest. I am not a great social studies teacher. I tried. But find the strengths that the people around you have. At the tables, you'll see a position statement for the American School Counseling Association. It is a position statement for how school counselors should support gifted and talented students. Our national association believes that this is part of their role. Now, when I had you raise your hands, very few of you said you work with your school counselor. Take that back to them. It's also on Icon. And ask them to support you in that way so that they can be knowledgeable about it as well. Work with administration on finding ways to change curricular or programmatic issues to support gifted students. And lastly, the thing that would help Megan, hold meetings with families, help them understand what gifted looks like, what concerns can come out with gifted kids, and what to look out for with their own child. All right. In essence, be the partner. Find a way to connect with other people so that you're not alone. So for the last time, I would like you to meet Megan. Megan is not Megan. Megan is me. That was my life. I didn't give you all of it, but that was essentially what I experienced growing up. It's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I had people just like all of you who took the time, who sat here for a day and met with people and learned more about giftedness so that you could support your kids. School was my safe place. School was the place that I could be myself, so that I can tell you that this is my story. But after working with gifted kids for over 20 years, this is a lot of kids' stories. They do not have a place where they feel themselves, where they can fully be themselves. For some of them, that's not school. For some of them, it's out on the streets. For some of them, it is their home. But help them find a place within your school. Help them find a place with you, because that can make the difference in talent development for these kids for the rest of their lives. I would not be where I'm at today if I would not have had those people in my life to say, hey, Erin, you can do this. I know you can do this. So there we go. Please, please be the expert. Advocate for kids like me. Hold space for kids like me. And create systems where kids like me could thrive. With 5 minutes over, I apologize, but I urge you to try and do this in the gifted kids' lives that you already experience. And thank you so much for your time, your attention, and the work that you do.